Got it.
And we're ready when you are, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let's call this meeting to order. And Councilman Shahid, I'm gonna call on you for a few words, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you alluded to earlier in our real estate committee meeting, our director, Tom O'Brien, lost his wife, Carolyn. Let's take a moment of brief silence in her memory. I went to the website to look at her obituary. She died awfully young. It seems unexpected, and I think it'd be appropriate if we just spend a few moments in silence in her memory.
Thank you.
In the prayer that we all know very well, the eternal rest granted them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May the souls of all the faithful departed, to the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Councilman. Approval of the February 13th minutes. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Properly moved in.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. Any questions on those minutes? Hearing none. Joe, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Now the temporary encroachments. Normally that would be Mr. O'Brien. Matt, are you going to comment on those? Most of the time it's just for information.
Yeah, so there's nothing. I talked with Tom earlier. He said there was nothing out of the norm, just the minor stuff, water,
just the usual
sprinklers, and just the normal stuff. He said nothing out of the norm.
All right, great. Thank you. Matter of fact, thank you for reaching out to Mr. O'Brien also.
Yeah.
G1 Environmental Services, Mr. Alta.
Yeah, so environmental services is running on time, ran on time last week. We have placed the order for our 2 new side load garbage trucks. We expect delivery of those in June/July. As our partner in Somerville that we're buying the trucks from has made sure that we are at the top of the list. In fact, one of our trucks is already being built, so we should be getting those here hopefully soon. The second glutton's on the street, so we're working both sides of King Street now with both gluttons. Other than that, everything is moving along as scheduled.
Help me out when you say glutton. What type of equipment is that?
So that's the sidewalk vacuum that we purchased one last year, and we bought another one at the beginning of this year.
All right, great. Do they make those trucks in Somerville? Oh, the dealership is in Somerville.
So the chassis manufacturer Dennis Eagle is located in Somerville, and they build them there. And they want their trucks in their backyard. So we bought 2 last year. And, so they're partnering with us, and as long as we buy from them, they're going to make sure that we get the trucks that we need when we need them.
Well, thank you, sir. That's great relationship building.
Yep.
Listen, we reported last meeting about everything being on time. I got to tell you, everybody was over the top on that. So again, thank you for your work and your team coordination on that. H1, Mr. Fountain, Dowden area project update, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to share my screen.
I can give you an update. There's a lot of work going on over there. And I'm happy.
All right.
So just these are some updates on some of the small projects, as well as some of the larger projects. We're starting with Dowden, which is one of our small project allocations. I know that council votes on these and allocates money in, and sometimes we don't always do as well of a job as we should coming back and letting everyone know how the project went and what the situation was. We're trying to make sure we're closing the loop and providing information on the finished product, not just the request for funding at the beginning of the project. This area, as Councilman Shade, I think, alluded to, has quite a history of property flooding, sanitary sewer overflow issues. There's a large section of impervious area from one of the local shopping centers that drains through the neighborhood, causes a lot of problems. There's also a large section of neighborhoods that drain through this existing area. We had Put this in for small project allocation funding, hired Thomas Hutton, who came in and did some survey work and some basic design work to identify choke points in the neighborhood. We took that information, and then city field operations forces went through, realigned the canal, restored some pipe systems. I'll show you a couple pictures of that in a minute. And then we coordinated with CWS, who is also going to build and they're just starting construction now, their new sewer lift station in that area to serve this neighborhood in Lenavar, to help alleviate more of the SSO issues as well. So it's a good area of collaborative work going on. Just for context of where we're talking about, this is kind of the Ashley Landing area here, Sumar Street being just to the north, which actually drains to a slightly different set of drainage systems. But you can see the portion of the shopping center that comes through the neighborhood, but also looking to the south, almost all of this red area through here all drains back up through a canal system and then out into eventually the marsh into Old Town, across Old Town Road. Basically what the city did was come back based on Thomas Hutton's recommendations from modeling work, realign this drainage canal and reopen the 3 box culverts, which actually feed into pipes rather than staying as open box culverts under Old Town Road. So we acquired some drainage easement from some willing to participate homeowners in the area for free dedication, realigned this bank on the drainage shelf, and then cleaned up the geometry of the canal to help the water flow more smoothly into those reopened pipes. Then came back through the neighborhood and cleaned out the existing pipes that convey most of the water into this canal. Well, so far working much better. We'll certainly see how it holds up through the hurricane season, but the modeling indicates it's likely to provide a really significant drainage improvement in everything except for the most intense, horrific level hurricanes.
Mr. Fountain or Councilmember Shea.
Yeah, and Matt, just want to make sure, didn't we increase, I thought we replaced a pipe out there from a smaller pipe to a larger one, or was that discussed at one point?
So there is another follow-on project where there's a buried pipe that goes through a section of the neighborhood that it could have a second pipe added, or that pipe could be upsized. It's a significantly more expensive item. That's where we'd kick into probably either its own small project allocation for that work or potentially a capital project, depending on how much we'd have to remove to get to that pipe. The modeling suggests that pipe is not the problem, even though it certainly stands out as a potential choke point. So what we're doing is the improvements that the modeling kind of calls out is saying this is the most likely current problems where this entryway into these culverts and reopening these culverts. What we'll do now is monitor it during different types of events and see if that pipe is causing an issue now that the downstream section is no longer problematic. And if it is, then we'll come back to council and make that recommendation. That's the next choke point in the model, the next most likely choke point, but it did not appear to cause problems or flooding in normal size design storms we run, like 25-year return period design storm events.
And while I've got him, Mr. Chairman, if I may, if you can indulge me a little bit longer.
Sure.
That, there are plans, Matt, for that has not come to the council yet. It's in the early stages, but for a lot of work to be done on Ashley Landing. And for those who are listening in on this, any of those demolition of the existing buildings on Ashley Landing and any new construction is going to have to be involved with the current flood management plans, our updated stormwater management plans. And so, and I remember this, Mayor, very vividly in our early days when after you got elected in 2015, and when I got elected in 2015, we were in that conference room in City Hall with Councilmember Waring and I think then Councilmember Moody. We were talking about impermeable surfaces, and as soon as those buildings were constructed on Ashley Landing, it seemed to, and I don't know if there's any correlation to this at all, that it seemed to have an impact on this flooding issue. So I just want to commend Matt. He's been we've been very dogged on this, and this project, even though it's called a small project, I hopefully will have such a huge impact. And you saw the map, and you saw the general geographic area that this is going to be helping with. And if there are any work that's going to be done on Ashley Landing with those proposed plans, those, I think, plans will have to meet up to our new standards and not aggravate, but actually maybe even help alleviate some of the other problems out there. If I'm saying that correctly, Matt.
Yep, you're absolutely correct, Councilman Shade. Similar to the recent redevelopment work over in the Doshers parcel in West Ashley, if this property has land disturbance, they will have to do in the current manual in a special protection area a 20% reduction in how much water they put off into that drainage system. So they'll have to make an improvement as part of any land disturbance work. So
Thanks,
tearing down buildings, tearing foundations, tearing up parking lot, all that kind of work.
Right. So right now that site, that Ashley Town Landing, I don't believe it has it. Does it have any retention on that site? Right.
No,
So
not
it
at all.
immediately flows off of that through this neighborhood. So that should be a big help, man.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Does it before leaving that site, that shot right there, does it make sense? Obviously, it's good if we can get the developer to do it, but are there any spots in there that will not be done? For example, where the I'm just looking at to the, I guess, left of it, right where it says Ashley Landing 1. I don't think any of those buildings are going to be disturbed. I don't think anyway, for the grocery store, as I remember the drawing. Does it make any
Yeah, the
sense to
buildings
partner over there for some retainage in that area, Matt?
Councilmember wearing the areas to be disturbed are closer to Old Town Road where it says
Right.
Ashley Landing 3.
Correct.
And
Up to
that's Charleston Estates Road behind that.
right. But I'm just wondering, does it make any sense to? It would be great if this whole site held the proper retainage before, matriculating through neighborhoods. Does it make sense, in particular, the Ashley Landing 1 area? Because if those apartments get built, then certainly they're going to have to take care of their retention.
That's correct.
But at Ashley Landing 1, does it make any opportunity maybe to partner with the developer to get a little bit more retention on that pervious site?
So it does make sense sometimes for the city side. It is frequently a challenge for the developers due to the value of the underlying property for them to risk any encumbrance of that property for a pay rate that we can afford basically on improvement projects. But we certainly will make that offer to discuss potential additional work they could do.
Okay. So I'd ask. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, I've been watching as that Dowden project has progressed, and it has a great visual impact as you're riding by, that you've got a lot more room for the water to go and to go. But I'm curious your comment about the box culverts. You say that one or more of those was actually covered up, and the project cleared the way for it to go. And then secondly, is that tidally influenced? Does the salt water come up all the way across the street?
So the tide does not come across into that section of the canal. You can see on the vegetation, we don't have any of the marsh grass or any of the typical, there's typical like lawn grass growing in the canal,
Right.
which is very low salt tolerance.
Gotcha.
So it is high enough. We don't see that impact. What was happening basically is it looked like the canal had either eroded or shifted over time and just moved south kind of away from where the northernmost culvert was. And the culverts are a little bit deceiving in that they look like box culverts, but they actually lead to pipes under the road because of the utility conflicts in the area.
I
So they're
see.
not really as big as they look. They're still sizable pipes, but they're much smaller than what they appear to be. So we were able to uncover some additional pipes and access where the water basically can flow down the canal and smoothly enter the pipes instead of flowing down the canal and trying to like turn a corner, which when you do that, it creates like turbulence and you don't get very much flow, surprisingly, in drainage systems. So that was one of the major modeling improvements, or the improvements to modeling suggested, was cleaning up the smoothness of that entry. And then yes, uncovering the pipe certainly provides some additional benefit as well.
Excellent. Thank you. What was the budget on this overall? whole project?
So probably out of, I've checked the exact numbers. We did a lot of the work in-house, which drastically reduced how much money we were spending on the project. But I'd say between materials and the consulting fees, we're probably on the order of $60,000, something like that. We certainly spent quite a bit of, if you count the money that we have budgeted into our operations crew, I mean, our construction crew spent weeks working on this project. So that would be a substantial O&M cost. You're probably looking at another $40,000 or so of city efforts on the project. But again, this is the kind of thing where a moderate amount of money can make a very large improvement to drainage in a large area sometimes.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, that's just what we as a city and your committee have been pursuing over the last few years.
I agree.
To focus on these kind of projects that don't, I mean, it may seem to the neighbors that it took us a while to get this done, but in the grand scheme of things, it got done in a relatively short period of time for a reasonable amount of money, and for the people in the pretty sizable drainage area can provide some real relief. So pat on the back to everybody here. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. Ditto to what you said, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Go back to the picture with the culverts under the road and the ditch side by side. Yeah. Will that ditch eventually drain out all that? It will always pretty much hold water.
So it does drain. It doesn't drain completely dry, generally based on where the groundwater table is in the area and the depth of the ditch. But you can see the entrance to the culverts are dry.
Right.
So some of it is just the how the groundwater is set up, how that canal has been graded over the years. Backfilling a canal like that is really challenging. You have to pump the whole thing dry and fill it to drain it out. So instead, this is basically deep enough that you don't really get a mosquito population. You get more of like an open water feature, like a linear pond, like a linear stormwater pond.
All right. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, we did not modify the bottom of the canal. We just cleaned up the geometry of it.
Right. Councilman Shea, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just one other point, Mr. Chairman. So were you looking at this culvert heading towards Old Town Road and those clump of trees to the left of that? Further back that way, just to show what a small improvement does, a small change does. When the Charleston Water Systems had put a pump station right there, they had blocked the drainage ditch. You can't see it in this picture coming towards us. That ditch right there, now that's got it. That ditch backed up, and the houses behind there, you can see that in the other photograph,
Right,
would flood that cul-de-sac. It didn't cost us anything to get that fixed. It just had to go back and then open and move that pump station up a little bit. It stopped flooding. It stopped the flooding.
wow.
So us paying attention to these details on things that we can improve on, and some of them are not that expensive, but
Right.
I can tell you that the homeowners greatly appreciated the opportunity to get that flood water out of their garage and their living room and dens. And it was just a very simple little fix. And Matt's point with all of this is, it took a little while to get us all together. We had to do a study, and we really thought it was going to be a much more expensive proposition, but it turned out, I mean, to do this for that money and the improvements we are expecting out of this really speaks volumes of what the attention to detail can add to a whole neighborhood, neighborhoods, I should say.
Let me tell you, that's one of the best bang for 100,000.
It's-
But
it's-
I've been through it. I said it looks like a whole lot more than 100,000 worth of work. Anyway, thank again all kudos there, your team involved with that one, Mr. Fountain. H2, Forest Acres update.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this Forest Acres is phase 2 of the drainage project that connects into the bikeway. It was the phase 1 of the Forest Acres project. We started construction on this about 3.5 months ago, 4 months ago. So I wanted to give a quick update of where we are and where the project's heading. Obviously, $11 million project. Started construction, as I mentioned, in fall of 2022. At this point, we've completed our tree removal. We have just a couple days left on the water sewer relocations in partnership with CWS that our contractor is doing in contract. Once those relocations are complete, we will be able to get out of the roadway and not have the road closure night work for a little while we're completing the other utility relocations. We have some Dominion, Comcast, AT&T relocations that we're doing along the road shoulders. Once those relocations are finished, roughly this summer, depending on weather and progress with those utility companies, we'll be installing the large box culverts under Playground Road. That will be a 2 to 4 week total closure of Playground Road as we basically dig the road up and install those major culverts through the roadway. That should be completed by late 2023, which will allow significant improvements of drainage throughout that whole system. That's the major choke point in the system right now. We'll then continue on with what's called phase 2B, and I'll show you the phases in a second. So phase 2A basically being this work to put the new box culverts under Playground Road and to improve the canal down to extend into the existing bikeway phase. So that again being completed by late 2023, and then that will shift the contractor into phase 2B, which is basically this upstream component tying back all the way up to Highway 61 on the north side, and then also having a western component that comes and ties in the residential neighborhoods and the apartment complexes into that drainage system. All of that then being completed in 2024. So making steady progress, should be out of the nighttime road closure work pretty quickly. As soon as we can finish up a couple more CWS relocations, then we'll have one more major closure likely in late spring, early summer on Playground Road. And then at that point, we'll mostly be in those drainage easements and out of the roadways again.
Yeah, it's great to look at. Tell you that. Any questions on Forest Acres? Appreciate all you're doing over there, Mr. Fountain, you and your team. East Oak Forest, item H3, I want to thank Councilman Saccharin for helping to get this on the agenda, and Mr. Fountain, information you pulled together on short notice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I know that, this is, as you know, from the public outreach meetings we're doing on Forest Acres, this has come up as a question that's also related to the Forest Acres project, is the East Oak Forest, West Oak Forest drainage system. A very small part of those communities is improved by the Forest Acres drainage system as well. Some of the northern areas do drain up into the Forest Acres section right along the bikeway, but the majority of those neighborhoods drain south. And this is another one of these maps where you start to have such a large area, it's hard to show all in one map, but you can kind of see on the top here, we're at North Sherwood, Byron Road, if you're familiar with the area,
right?
Oak Forest Drive coming down kind of the main area here, which is sort of the bottom round of Playground, coming down to Highway 17. So the drainage system for all of these areas, basically all of this here tucks in, comes into this ditch that runs along the backside of Shelley, comes down under Highway 17 through the church parking lot, turns, comes back behind the Harris Teeter complex, under the Greenway, and then out into the open marsh. That is a very large drainage area draining through a very constricted drainage system. So we've been, again, similar to what we were doing in the Old Town Dowden area, we've been looking at what can we do to try to improve drainage in this large system as it comes through all these constrictions. Again, an area with heavy flooding, as we'll talk about in a second, the city's actually acquired multiple properties in this set of neighborhoods with FEMA grants from repeated flood damage. It's a challenging outfall. So what we're looking at is trying to kind of, similar to the Dowden area, look at multiple short-term improvements we can make, and then also have in mind considerations for larger term, longer term improvements that might have a higher cost, but also have some larger benefits in the future. So short run, zooming in a little bit, this is the Oak Forest at Keats. So Keats Road running here, Oak Forest Road running here. This is near the top of the system. It's where a lot of the neighborhoods tie into this Oak Forest drainage system. These are two of the properties that the city's already acquired and demolished the homes on in coordination with some FEMA grants. So we've completed design work with a consultant to retrofit these into basically properties that will help store more water and then get planted with native vegetation that can both uptake water and provide some kind of beautification and amenity to those empty lots, which are currently frequently flooded. So these are planned to go into construction this fall, back when we're into the planting season, and can basically complete that. We'll probably do the grading most likely in-house over the summer and then plant them in the early fall. We're actually going to tie that in with a third property that is a little further down on Shelley Road here. This property is the same general concept, but we're actually adding a maintenance pathway. One of the advantages of this property is it's a great access point into the rear yard ditch system that runs through this community that otherwise we have very little ability to get access to. So we're building a maintenance pathway into that now. We've actually been doing some cleaning, taking out basic debris and tree fall and obstruction in this drainage system that's happened over the series of hurricanes we've had over the last years, trying to improve the drainage where we can. This rear yard system as well. But as I show you here, as we get further south into this system does become tidally influenced and has basically salt marsh vegetation in it. This will run into a series of Army Corps and OCRM permitting requirements that we have to work through. So what we're currently doing is basically looking at these existing constrictions under Savannah Highway in this channel system. There's a driveway in the church parking lot that has some pipes in it, and then the greenway itself, trying to figure out what pipe sizing is necessary to be able to move the water out and not have those be constrictions. We're working with the church and the car wash to obtain drainage easements on areas that don't currently have easement on the system. Then we're going to basically, after we have those easements in hand, we'll be working with the Army Corps of Engineers to do both maintenance along the existing open channel system and likely replacing some of the damaged or failed pipes. We do need to figure out, again, when we're talking about short-term versus long-term, small project-wise, we can work certainly in the driveway, possibly in the greenway. If we end up seeing a constriction under Highway 17, that would get kicked into a large-scale capital project, and we'd have to reassess that component of the project. But this cleaning and maintenance work and some of the pipe upsizing and easement acquisition, we're all doing under an existing, again, small project allocation from last year, which will let us hopefully make some significant improvements to getting water out of this community more efficiently.
What kind of time frame well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Mayor, you had your hand up. I didn't know whether it was, I just saw it, but was it for Forest Acres or what the question on ESO?
You could come back to me after this discussion.
Okay.
From the last one.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Well, what's the time frame on some of that cleaning out goals to clean out this drainage from Savannah to by the church? And
we'll be working on the modeling for those constrictions over the next couple of months to evaluate pipe sizing. That'll let us simultaneously working through the easement acquisition with the survey ongoing. And then we have some OCRM critical area surveying working in this area right now. We have easement surveying going on in this location. So I'd say we would hope to have by the end of 2023, easements acquired, surveys complete, and have submitted our permit applications to the Corps for cleaning, and then be able to do our cleaning in early 2024 and be considering the pipe upsizing by late 2024. So we're looking about that type of time scale.
Great. Do we know what size the pipe is now? The existing pipe?
The culvert under Savannah Highway is like a 4x4 box culvert. The driveway pipes are hard to tell them that they're so buried under the tidal conditions and in pretty rough shape. They're probably something like twin 48s. So they're not small, but they're not in very good condition in this area. And the greenway is something like twin 48s as well. So it may be that Savannah Highway is the major constriction, other than how much debris and sediment has accumulated in this channel, which we'd obviously like to get that cleaned out so we can get the water to move out a little more efficiently, as have the pipes be the constriction, if the channel being the constriction.
Is that something a new improved relationship with, I guess, some of the local people can help out with? I mean, some of the relationship with, Councilmember Pell and you all have established with, local OCRM people? people?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is the type of work that the Army Corps and DHEC have put together their regional permit to try to speed up how this would work. This previously would have gone into what's called an individual permit that is typically like a 2+ year permitting process. Once you've basically done all of the engineering work and you're ready to move forward. So the general permit process is supposed to be much shorter, more like 3 to 6 months.
Great.
Once your documentation in. So we're optimistic that will, greatly speed the completion of the project work.
That's awesome. Questions, committee members? That's good information. We got the meeting with ESO in about an hour and a half. So thanks for, hopefully some of them are on the line listening to some of this. So thanks for this update. Mr. Mayor, you want to go back to Forest Acres?
If you don't mind that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
That one image of the neighborhood with the phase 2A brought back some memories. Not that one. I think the one next behind it, that one there. So I participated with our city staff on a neighborhood cleanup, and there's some existing ditches, of course, all through there. I just have this memory of helping our staff. They did such a remarkable job, but you would not believe, the crap that we pulled out of those ditches.
Yeah, I believe.
I mean, people were throwing just their bags of garbage in there. There were grocery carts. There was tires. It was unbelievable. And I know we have a littering ordinance. It seems to me, just having that recollection, Julia, if we could have a elevated penalty and or a separate offense for people who in any way block litter into our drainage systems. I know there's probably a ticket we could write somebody if we saw them pushing a cart into a ditch, but we ought to make it a separate offense in the city of Charleston, when you're messing with our drainage ditches.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Mr. Mayor. As a matter of fact, especially the carts, I think that's maybe in the suburban areas, more of a problem with those carts ending up in the ditch. But I think we should come up with an ordinance when somebody takes a cart off the parking lot. In other words, it's not their cart. When they take a Harris Teeter cart, they're pushing it 2 blocks down the street away from.
Yeah.
Eventually it ends on the side of the road and eventually into somebody's ditch. We see that. I've actually got some pictures where I've ridden around and just taken pictures of shopping carts that's either on the side of the road or in a ditch. And, I don't know whether we put some onus on the store. Target used to have carts where after it went a certain amount of feet, the wheels would lock up, which prevented them from taking it. Somebody from taking it off the premises. We got this thing on plastic bags. I got to tell you, this, carts, especially in Orleans Woods and around that area, we got a big major canal that drains, down Orleans Road and eventually underneath Orleans Road and through the mall and then to the Stono. But our people have taken more than their share of carts out of that doggone canal.
It could be all kinds of debris in addition to those carts. Maybe we have a special penalty ordinance, signage, whatever. I don't know, just a thought. I had that memory looking at this map.
I agree with that.
We'll look into it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Fountain, back on you. I didn't have any more questions on ESO. Does anybody else? Thanks. Citadel Woods, Wildwood update?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Citadel Woods, Wildwood Townhome area, this is basically the community at the top of the Air Harbor neighborhood. So Citadel Woods is the area that's all within the city. At the top, there is some sections of Air Harbor that also are within the city. The northern part of Air Harbor also was a drain, as we talked about in the last committee meeting, Chairman, north up kind of under Highway 17 up into the Citadel Mall drainage system, under 526, down behind Costco, around the car dealerships, turn the corner, kind of come south across 17 again, and then flow out through the system by Orange Grove. So we've been looking at trying to make improvements. That caused a lot of flooding in Citadel Woods, in Air Harbor, in the Wildwood townhomes, and here. Obviously, we're familiar with the rest of the DuPont Wapu drainage. So we've been doing some smaller projects again in these areas, trying to relieve some of the flooding as well. So it's touching base on a couple of those. Let me back up. This is project work we did basically in this area between the Wildwood townhomes and the outfalls through the Ruby Tuesdays back across Highway 17, trying to free up some of this area to drain more cleanly to the north and also store some of the water when it does back up from how far it has to go and basically normally would cause flooding in these neighborhoods. These are again small scale improvements. They're not certainly fixing the drainage in the DuPont Wapu Basin, but they are making short-term improvements in some challenging areas. So this is a picture along the Greenway. You can kind of see the townhomes, which are kind of individually owned homes backing up, and you'll see heavy flooding through this area. Here's some pictures of the section along the Greenway, some pictures of what the townhome parking lots and the properties look like. They have quite a bit of flood challenges. We've come through with small project work again, and this is just completed, so it certainly doesn't look as beautiful perhaps as some of the more heavily vegetated properties, but it is seeded and will vegetate. This is this area here that heavily floods. We basically built in it's actually a very shallow drainage swale to store some of the flood water during a rain event instead of having it spread out and into the units, and then also allow it to drain out once the downstream flooding abates. We've also gone to the other side of the townhome complex to the north, where it tries to drain back out through the Ruby Tuesdays, and cleaned up the drainage systems in those areas so that the water can get out of those neighborhoods and into the pipes under Savannah Highway as smoothly as possible. It seems to be draining much better. We had some of these recent storm events where we had a couple inches of rain overnight a few weeks ago. The report so far that it's draining much better. As we get some warmth last week and this week, we do expect to see the grass pick up a little better, which will also help clean up the site and help it drain a little bit better. But again, very small projects. We ended up building this in-house with our construction crew. We did try to contract this out so we could do a little bit faster, and the prices came in so exorbitantly, we ended up building in-house with one of our construction crews, and did a great job. Came in, did some tree removal, did some additional maintenance in the other area. Another good successful project that everybody seems to be pretty pleased with from a short-term scenario. Now we have more work to do on improvements in the general area, and we talked about those in the last meeting. Just wanted to show you what we've done in the short term.
Thank you a lot. Go back to the item number 7. Slide number 7.
Oh.
Yeah. The area that I don't know, is that south of 17, right where your icon is?
Yeah, south of 17, that's right.
Right. The brief discussion we had, I think, with Barry about, and I think there's been some talk with the county as well, on keeping some of that proper water south of 17 and taking it out of, I'm gonna say, that drainage loop where it goes through Doo-Wop basically twice. It goes underneath and then comes back underneath 17 for a second time. Any legs on that idea about keeping up water on, basically digging another canal and keeping it south on 17?
Yeah,
so that
absolutely.
does not enter the Doo-Wop Basin.
So we absolutely, we have some small project work. There's a city right of way here along paper road that's likely an old railroad track on Boulevard Street. We added some small project work in to clean out some of the canals that are along this way, and then the county, because Air Harbor drains in this area, the county is partnering with us, and they've actually hired a consultant to basically try to evaluate how you could work with CWS on the Greenway to add that drainage down the greenway and into this system, which is a much more, even though it's a long drainage path, it's much more straightforward than the existing circuitous route through all the pipe systems. So that's something the county's currently in design with their consultant on, and we've got our section here along the city right of way to contribute.
I mean, I just think that's great. I mean, taking that water out of that, you know, everybody, there's so much competition for that big canal in front of Citadel Mall until when that, you know, gets inundated, everything just backs up like dominoes, you know, into the neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, thank you. Any questions on Citadel Woods and Wildwood project?
Just want to thank Matt and his team for working with the folks over at Wildwood Townhomes, and they feel heard. They approached me very early on in 2020, and to see us where we are today with infrastructure in the ground is just a really cool sight to see. So really appreciate it, and it's just wonderful seeing all these projects throughout West Ashley and Councilman Shade's district, Councilman Waring's district, my district. And as we've seen, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot financially to move the needle in a significant way in West Ashley and in James Island and elsewhere. This is not Calhoun West or Spring Fishburne or, you know, the perimeter wall or anything like that. I mean, mitigating stormwater comes in many shapes and sizes, and sometimes the smaller projects can have tremendous impact, which is what we're seeing. So thank you, Matt, and your whole team.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman, for your comments, because, and these are the projects that the people see. I mean, they see them when they go into work and coming home, you know. Are we still putting out signs or anything? I know we had talked about that, you know, before COVID and all.
We do, yeah. We're really good about it with our maintenance folks. We are pretty good about it with our in-house construction work. That's the area we're trying to improve on, is we do a good job with flyers and handouts. We're trying to make it a little more consistent with the sign placement for in-house construction, but with maintenance work, we do a pretty good job of it now.
Okay, great. Item 5, report on recent stormwater grants and applications.
Do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. I just wanted to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't see your hand, so thank you.
I point out that, you know, these construction projects, they don't look beautiful while they are occurring, and to that point, letting people know what we're doing and you know, who's doing it. I just want to thank Matt and his team for Project Through. There's one going on right around the corner from my house that we're having a community meeting later this week to just explain again what these projects are, what they'll ultimately look like. So it's, you know, it's not, you know, figuring out the funding piece and doing the work. It's like really a lot of PR too, and a lot of patience, explaining to people who just want this to happen now, who want it to look beautiful, what goes in to make it. Has meant a lot, I know, to people that I've been able to explain that they're doing this work and making sure that people really understand what exactly they're getting.
Right. Matt, is there anything that kind of roll around the top of your head that we can do to help you?
I'd say most of our challenges right now are still trying to staff fully. I mean, I think the pay increases certainly have helped, and we're seeing much more competitive applications, but it takes a little bit of time to close some of those gaps, and that's probably the biggest challenge right now. I mean, we have some great crews, as you saw, doing in-house construction work, but only a few folks who have that skill set. And we're trying to hire a few more with those pay adjustments. Engineering wise, you know, we have been short our small project manager since we created the position a year and a half ago. So we're optimistic we'll be able to hire that this round. So, I mean, we try to get to projects as quickly as we can, but that's why you'll often see us not start everything all at once, because we need to close one out to get the next one going. If you start doing too many things, they end up all being a mess instead of all being done well. So we try to be a little more controlled in what we start to make sure we finish it.
Well, don't suffer in silence now. If you need help, please let us know. That's some good stuff. I'll now report on recent stormwater grants and applications.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is just to quickly bring in, hopefully, the committee up to speed on what we've done over the last few years with grants, and then it kind of leads into a discussion very briefly on some potential grant applications that we're considering in item 6. So I'll just present this very quickly, and then if there's any questions, certainly let me know. But grants that we have submitted but not yet heard on decisions are primarily these 2 ARPA funded grants. This is SCRA being the first one. That's the when you hear about the very large pot of money that was directed by the state from ARPA funding into infrastructure. This is that grant. It is primarily directed at water, wastewater, and stormwater. There's a very large group of submittals that have been put in for that money. We, as a city, applied for the King Uji project at a $10 million request. They have said so far they are thinking about announcing at the end of March, but I think there's been a little bit hesitancy on the time frame because there's still the uncertainty at the state legislature if more money gets added into the funding and how that would be accommodated. The other one is SCORE. That's the Office of Resiliency. That's the more green infrastructure oriented ARPA funding. It's a much smaller pot of money, more like 70 million instead of the more like 900 million for the water wastewater side. We applied for Barbary Woods at $7.6 million. They were supposed to announce originally a couple of Fridays ago, but each Friday so far they've had to delay it for another week. They're hoping for this Friday, but I'm not sure if they're expecting to hit that date for sure. But that's what they've announced, is they're expecting this Friday to announce their awards. And then lastly, we had applied for an HMGP at King and Uji. This sort of is a backup for the ARPA. The HMGP grants are not as common to see fund large capital projects. They seem to enjoy funding more fire station improvements and emergency response. Our infrastructure tends to be a little bit more challenging for a traditional HMGP grant. That's when FEMA created the BRIC, was to try to come up with a more infrastructure friendly grant application. But we did put this in because we had a lot of the documentation already together for the ARPA award. And Sarah Hager, who's our grant writer, does a wonderful job, but we try not to overload her too badly because it is much, much, much better, as anyone who does grant work knows, to write incredibly strong applications consistent with the priorities of a grant agency than to throw kind of grant spaghetti at the wall and hope that somebody randomly decides to award money to one of your projects. That is almost never successful, despite sounding like a good idea. So we focus really hard on developing projects in collaboration with priorities from grant agencies on what they value, and then really doing top-notch submittals to try to increase our potential for award. And certainly, we always encourage, if you have good contacts or you have good resources in any of these agencies, for you to help inform them on how the project works and anything we may have missed in our application, because that can be helpful. And then just briefly on kind of history of awarded grants. This is not necessarily every grant we've ever received from a stormwater department, but sort of a highlight reel. Recently we just announced the council, last council meeting before, with the Army Corps of Engineers, the MUSC pump station upfit, which is a $3 million injection from the Army Corps towards that pump station. Conservation Bank is helping fund a property acquisition in Barbary Woods for $100,000. We had a South Carolina budget appropriation from Representative Stavronakis and Windermere for $1.5 million last year. HUD CDBG MIT, you're certainly familiar with the Earhart Medical District tunnel extension for $10 million. We're adding in basically the Earhart section of the medical district into the Spring Fishburne project with that tunnel. That work's going on right now. The STIB had kindly agreed to give us the extra $21.5 million for the Spring Fishburne project, with construction increases on that work. SCRA, which again is the agency that is considering the ARPA funding for the state, previously had awarded us the King Uji Phase 1 at $500,000 towards that project. The Nature Conservancy found a donor and contributed $35,000 towards the Church Creek project work that's going on. National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for Church Creek also has awarded about $1.5 million towards the projects going on in that basin. SCORE, which is the Office of Resilience, again, their revolving loan fund, has announced, but not yet provided the full documentation for us for Barbary Woods of a very low interest loan for $3 million for that project. National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Johns Island Planning Grant. This was sort of the lead-in that led to the Barbary Woods project, $117,000. And then we have a series of FEMA property acquisition grants that are well over $10 million of properties we've acquired over the years from flood damage, many of which are in the Church Creek Basin and are being converted over between the Bridgepoint townhomes and some of the other properties. But there are some in other portions of West Ashley as well.
Man, that's outstanding. So you don't have a bottom line figure on that? It's impressive.
A lot of good work. We have a lot of great projects as a city, which makes it, I think, attractive for grant agencies to fund our projects because we do high impact, like high visibility project work that actually gets built and completed, which is something that a lot of grant agencies struggle with. So we've had some great partners, done some great projects. Certainly looking forward to continuing that.
I agree. Going over the other side of September Clark, Spring Fishburne, on Haggett Avenue, at least the one that drainage that's proposed with the cleanup of Gatson Creek, is that done, or that's a proposal, or where are we on that?
So the section of it that would be involved with the West Edge project had been basically involved in a series of legal challenges on their permitting requirements. Some of the state challenges, I think, are somewhat resolved. Certainly Ms. Copeland might be able to speak better towards the legal situation, but I think they're still progressing through some of those permitting legal hurdles, and then would expect when they complete that to start construction, which would then provide a different drainage route, both to disconnect the existing tidal flooding and to create a new improved outfall to the north that would help that area drain from gravity, which then would let them complete the tie-in to our Spring Fishburne drainage system for the small section to the south, which I could pull out a map if we needed to, but that basically gets cut off from drainage from those two directions. So it is still progressing as far as I'm aware, Councilman Waring. I think they're just working through the typical process for permitting and then permitting challenges.
Good deal. Councilman Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Matt, this is going to sound like a loaded question to you, but and I notice all of the grantees and grantors listed on here, but what is the general correlation between when we make these applications? What is the sort of the criteria, if there is an overriding criteria for making these applications for these type of things, these type of projects?
So different agencies have different priority criteria. So if you're working with the South Carolina Transportation Infrastructure Bank, they're going to want to see projects that are helpful to the DOT primarily, where there's going to be something that overlaps, where basically the city is enabling DOT to do more work than DOT would normally be able to do. And that's an oversimplification, but it's a general priority for the state. Where something like National Fish and Wildlife Foundation wants to see ecological value involved in your project, like how are you promoting and supporting natural resources and habitat systems, where the Army Corps wants to see traditional cost-benefit ratios, right? They want to see that what is your existing property damage and financial impacts versus what the benefits would be from your project and the cost of your project. So that's why you'll see some of our or like HUD CDBG MIT wants to see how are you benefiting low to moderate income populations with your project work. So you very much have to target the project to the agency rather than kind of applying for whatever project you most need money for, because each agency has very much its own focus and needs.
And the reason I'm asking is, we've talked about the high impact, low cost of what we're doing on Dowden project, and then we have a very high end project over on West Pawnee Place, which has a lower impact geographically. And I'm just wondering, that doesn't qualify for any of these types of grants. I
Yeah,
mean,
so
there's
residential-
this unequal balance with sometimes with cost versus geographic area of improvement, which sometimes gets off balance. So, but that type of project will not fit any of these grant applications.
Residential properties or projects are probably the most challenging. If you get an inexpensive enough project where you see very high cost to benefit ratios, you've often kind of gone below the funding threshold that a lot of agencies are looking for, where they want to make larger awards frequently because of the administrative cost of running a grant. That a $50,000 or $100,000 grant from many agencies is so administratively burdensome that it isn't there isn't as much benefit from receiving that grant. There are certain agencies that specialize in those and do a good job. SCRA often does a really good job running a smaller grants. Their maximum is normally $500,000. They kind of customize themselves into those style of grants, but a lot of the agencies are looking more for these multi-million-dollar projects. And frequently when you get into multi-million-dollar residential, it can be slightly more challenging to show a like extremely high cost benefit ratio that you might see in like a commercial corridor or business corridor, where you can show the economic impacts that kind of multiply out over a larger area, because you get a much higher traffic count, you get the economic impacts of the business in addition to the people who actually live in the basin. So it's possible. Like, we've certainly seen grant applications, and we've done some that work that way. When we've done Barbary Woods, which is a residential neighborhood, we've certainly done Church Creek, which are residential neighborhoods. We've just customized those into agencies that have other considerations that, like when you see ecological benefit to your project or land preservation to your project, that suddenly brings in other kind of more or less traditional infrastructure agencies who want to fund unusual projects. So it's possible, but a little bit more challenging.
Any other questions?
I was afraid he was going to say that. Well, but thanks for giving us that overview, Matt. And I mean, that's what I was expecting to hear from you. Thanks.
So some of it is that traditional cost benefits, like quality of life, is not as easy to measure in a traditional cost benefit ratio. It's looking at like structural damage. It's looking at, are you blocking emergency vehicle access? But it's not looking at, is it making people's lives miserable? I mean, you could try to do pre-post like property valuation assessments, but a lot of our residential projects are parcels where yards are repeatedly underwater, roads are repeatedly underwater. There's significant impacts to living your life, but not as much pure property damage occurring on a daily basis.
Okay. Item 6, discussion on U.S. Army Corps Engineers potential funding request. Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is basically the Army Corps of Engineer has, they have a process similar to what we have for the MUSC pump station, where they receive requests for funding authorizations, where they then have the ability, once they have a funding authorization, to make requests for actually receiving money into projects. So if they have an authorization, they can then do a supplemental request for a future year asking for funding under an appropriation. And then once they have an appropriation, they can actually do the project. So there is an existing authorization that Representative Mace's office had pushed through partially to the Army Corps of Engineers to look at potential drainage improvements in the city of Charleston. It's a pretty unusual authorization in that the Corps mostly works on tidal surge issues. They do drainage in New Orleans, but it hasn't been something they've done in a lot of other areas. So it's something the Corps is very interested in putting an appropriation request for, to see if they can provide some benefit on that. So there are The project that we've primarily been looking at potentially for that request is DuPont Wapu phases 5 through 10, which are kind of large projects, again, in a very flood impacted basin. It does have to score well on a cost benefit ratio of the Army Corps. They're a very strict economic cost benefit ratio agency. So that's something we'll have to evaluate. We also have been looking with them at the King Uji project. That was one of the projects that Representative Mace had originally supported in the authorization request. We would certainly, we're pretty far along in that project design at this point. It tends to be a long process for the Army Corps dollars to come through. This is likely a 2025 type funding if it occurs. So I would certainly like to find the King Uji funding on one of the other grants we've applied for, if possible, because going for federal funding, pushing the project back for 3 or 4 years potentially, and backing up to incorporate federal requirements in the project would likely cost a lot of money, and there's no guarantee of funding in a federal appropriation for it, but it might be one that we consider based on Representative Mace's office having supported that project in the initial round. You can, in theory, apply for multiple projects. It's not that you can only apply for one. And then just wanted to mention to Council the other major upcoming grant application, the HUD CDBG program that is funding the Earhart project currently has its final round of applications for, it's an MIT project. It's where they receive money after a major disaster. MIT stands for mitigation. So the last round where they have to expend the remainder of their funds is coming up this spring. Our intent is to apply for Cooper Jackson. We've talked with them quite a bit about it. It's obviously it's HUD funding. They want to see an LMI benefit. Cooper Jackson has a very large LMI population, a lot of affordable housing development in the area. It's something their agency, the State Office of Resiliency, feels pretty good about because they don't have a lot of HUD mitigation work currently going on directly in affordable housing neighborhoods. So that's where we're intending our application, but we certainly, and all these will come through council before they go in, but we just wanted to see if there are any questions or any concerns on kind of this general approach that we're considering.
Questions, committee members? Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to add a shout out very sincerely to Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who put in the authorization for us to have this opportunity with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to pursue these other projects, and her staff as well. I met with them when I was in Washington in January, and they look to work with us over the next couple of years as we identify projects and then ask for the appropriation to go with the authorization that she already got passed and put in place. So we really owe Nancy a big thank you.
Yeah. Let's do it. I agree with you. I mean, thanks for sharing that, Mr. Mayor. That's good information. Sometimes people like that, we give resolutions. We'll do resolutions on that as well. But anyway, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other input from any committee member? Mr. Fountain, you have actually earned, I don't know if you drank a cool one, but you had a lot today in a short period of time and covered a lot of ground, man. But definitely deserve putting your feet up and getting a little relaxation after all of that. Good committee meeting. Any last comments from any committee members? Hearing none. Let's adjourn this meeting by acclamation. I look forward to seeing all of you all tomorrow.
Thank you all.